What do you make of those guys walking out on Match of the Day, by the way?
Nah, if it had been me, I wouldn't have walked out. I think that is another example of modern management. The tail wags the dog in football today. And there's only one club in the country right now where that doesn't happen. That's Man City, where the manager is all powerful. But the manager is the boss in name only.
And you came from this stellar career that a lot of these guys have had whiffs of, but yours was stellar. But then you land as a player manager at Rangers and you're going to Liverpool and you produce the second worst records of a Liverpool manager in 30 years.
This is Up Front with me, Simon Jordan. I believe there are a lot of vacuous, uninformed, unchallenged opinions out there. I want to get to the bottom line and cut through the nonsense. So with this podcast with William Hill, I'm going to get people with strong views, strong opinions, and get them to stand them up to proper scrutiny. There's a good chance I might learn something along the way, but more importantly, so might you.
On this episode of Up Front, we have one of the most formidable, talented midfielders the British Isles ever produced. A very significant manager, so much so, I even nearly employed him. An appointment to listen pundit, and the president of his own fan club, Graeme Souness.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
And thank you for that welcome.
Last time I saw you was sadly hanging around an airport in Glasgow, looking for anybody that would take a picture with you. But it was sad to watch this need for people to see you.
Can I just expand on that?
Tell me. Only if it's interesting.
I try to be generous, and
I've never seen any of that.
I try to be very generous. And if you recall, I kept saying to the people who came and asked for my photograph, would you like a photograph with these two?
Well, we all see things differently, don't we? And we have the Souness view and we have the real view. But anyway, Graeme, moving on from that, one of the things I wanted to start talking to you about is a subject matter that I think is very prevalent in association with you. I watched you as a kid, because obviously I'm a lot younger than you. And one of the things that I always associate with you, and I think you embodied at the time, and I'm curious to see if you still do now, is leadership and captaincy and all that it sort of should have represented. I wanted to get from you what you think leadership is.
When you become the captain of a football team, I think it's about setting an example at every turn. And that's not to say I was perfect.
Right. On the pitch and off the pitch.
Yeah, I'm quite. It's not something that I sort of acknowledged at the time. It's something I thought, that's pretty impressive. But I look at the people that chose me to be the captain, Jock Stein, Bob Paisley.
Yeah.
I'm proud of it. You know, these are real football men who had other big players to choose from that chose me. And I can remember Joe Fagan saying to me when I was made captain at Liverpool, don't do anything different. We've chose you as captain because of the way you play football. Just be yourself. And I am always worked on the principle, this is in the football sense, that if I was having a good time, first of all, I had to get my job right. But if I was having a good time, I was then able to help others. And that's how it unfolded for me.
Is leadership about constantly operating at a high level and expecting and demanding it of those around you? Or is it setting an example by the manner of which you speak or the manner in which you play? Or is it a combination of all the above?
I'm a great believer, and I think you've heard me say this many, many times, that to have a successful football club, you have to have good senior pros.
Yeah.
And I look at myself when I walked through the door at Liverpool and how I changed in the 7 years I was there and what I was like when I left. I wasn't the best pro when I walked through the door, but I learned from some very serious football players. And then 7 years later, when I became a senior pro, or when I left the club, I like to think I'd passed that information on.
When you look at the leadership that you would have developed through the experiences you had for the managers that you played for, and the players that you played with, and you now look at the prism of football, or through the prism of football and what's supposedly leadership now, what do you think's changed? What's your overview? I know what my view is. I think they're lightweights. I don't think they know what leadership really is.
I think if you asked every single manager in the Premier League, they would say that privately. The players are pampered pooches, that they don't really care. That I think is the single biggest reason.
But hasn't it always been thus? I mean, I remember.
No, it wasn't.
But hasn't it? Hang on. We're talking about players, not in essence. Unless a player gets what he wants in this day and age, then there tends to be a problem. And you judge, I believe, and I think you are the same, but maybe you tell me something different. I believe you judge people in adversity, not when things are going well. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, you only find out what you've got in the dressing room when you've lost a few games back to back.
Tell me a time when your leadership was questioned as a player.
I was out with a bad back. It was the worst injury I had as a player, really. I'd attempted to play golf. I was cack-handed. I twisted my back. I ended up being out for 10 consecutive games. Bob Paisley was out for the exact same 10 games with pleurisy. So I went to Joe Fagan and Ronnie Moran in the boot room, and the build-up to the game on the weekend, which I think was against Wolves. And I'd declared myself fit on the Thursday. And I said, I don't expect to come straight back in. I said, but...
And they told you that
I'm declaring fit. No, they said, well, look, we're Wolves at home. I think it was Wolves, all due respect to them. I think we'll be okay at the weekend. So skip that, but you'll definitely play on the Tuesday night at Spurs. Hard away game. So I said, yeah, it's fine by me. But I had given them the option to say to me, well, we're winning every game. We can't bring you straight back.
You didn't give them the option to say it to you. They're management, right? You're the player.
I was saying to them, I don't expect to come straight back in. So the option is theirs to confirm that or not. So they said, no, play on Tuesday night. Take the weekend off, another few days, play Tuesday. So I am now under the illusion when I leave the boot room, I'm playing on a Tuesday night. So on the Monday we go down there. I can remember, I think it was Terry Mack said to me, are you going to play tomorrow night? I said, yes. No, that's great. That means I'm not playing. And he's obviously thinking the team's been going well. Terry Mack is a great friend of mine. Yeah. On the Tuesday morning we trained, and I used to room with Kenny Dalglish, and we had trained, and then we'd gone back to our room, we'd showered, and there was a knock on the door, and I had a sixth sense. Not just on the knock on the door, but maybe how they'd been speaking and acting in the training on the Tuesday morning, and the way they were speaking to me. I don't know, but I can remember when the knock came to the door, I thought, I bet that's them going to tell me I'm not going to play. And that's exactly what it was. So I told them what I thought, sat down, wrote out a transfer request, and went down to the bar. And Bob Paisley walked in. He's going in for lunch where the players were. And the players had all seen me sitting having a gin and tonic at the bar. And he saw me and he came over. He said, what's the story? I said, well, told him. They said, we'll see about that. Now, I think maybe Bob had been feeling he'd had his nose put out of joint because they'd won the games without him as well. Anyway, he said, we'll see about that. Went and came back. He said, you're playing.
I would think that going to the extreme of saying, well, I tell you what, I'm going to throw I'm not just going to have a little few words about it and tell people what I think. I'm going to throw an exit missile in there, give everybody an F-off pill, and I'm going to put a transfer request in there. Mm-hmm. Do you not think that's going from one extreme to the other? And do you not think that's a case of, well, sometimes you have to adapt to circumstances. Sometimes to be a leader, you have to accept that things aren't perfect and adjust and go, I tell you what, I'll let it go this time, but I'm not going to let it go again.
When I look back on that incident, I don't think I did anything wrong.
Well, if you were playing today, you'd get away with it full stop.
No, if I was playing today...
And you'd probably get a pay rise for it.
I would do it again. That's me. I had given them the opportunity. I had told all my teammates, yes, I'm playing. And then he's embarrassed me. For no reason. He didn't give me any reason. He just said, we'll decide not to play you.
I know that you have a very high opinion of yourself, and I think it's right to have so, because if you don't believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you? But there is a background of every now and again, in order to do what you want, you've got to do as you're told every now and again. And it feels like in this instance, you didn't get precisely what you were entitled to. Do you look back on it now? You're now saying, irrespective of the benefit of time and the journeys that you wouldn't do any differently.
No, because then I become a manager. Then I think, as we were talking, I'm thinking, if I was to do that to one of my big players, you're playing, knowing he is definitely going to tell, because dressing room is a small place, they all talk to each other. So then everyone in the dressing room knows that I have told this big player he's going to play. And I'm going to turn around to him and say 3 days later, sorry, I've changed my mind. I know that is a major problem for me as a manager.
I don't agree with you on that, but that's your life, your journey. You'll handle it how you want. And my opinion, whether it's good or bad, is probably indifferent in this instance. When you look at leaders now in football, and again, we talk about the leadership model that you came from. Let's pick out some people that are perceived leaders, or supposedly supposed to be leaders. Mm-hmm. And let's pick out one of your perhaps favourite hobby horses, Manchester United, and say Bruno Fernandes as a leader.
No, he is obviously not a leader. It's as plain as the nose on the end of your face. He is not a leader. His attitude when they went 3-0 down at Liverpool was appalling.
I agree with you. that's not leadership in any shape or form. The way that he reacted to the adversity, the way he appeared, he denies it and says that I wasn't looking to come off. But the whole kit and caboodle from pushing linesmen
at the time, Simon, you would not want to be in the trenches with him. Simple as.
What can you imagine that Ten Hag is thinking as a former manager by doubling down with the whole world? Everyone looked at that Bruno Fernandes situation.
And everyone came to the same conclusion.
Everyone came to the same conclusion, except the fellow that actually makes the decision.
I think that is another example of modern management. The tail wags the dog in football today. And there's only one club in the country right now where that doesn't happen. That's Man City, where the manager is all powerful. But the manager is the boss in name only. He's thinking Fernandes is a good player. Fernandes, you'll see, be a star when they're on top and they're on the front foot. And he's creative, and he is a real talent. He is a real talent, but he showed a side to him that day at Anfield, which is very unattractive. But the manager man you have right now is willing to overlook that because he knows going forward that he will win him games, he will score him goals. But in his head, the manager's head, he will know the first time I come up against a really difficult situation again, is he going to go missing? And I think the manager knows the answer to that.
When you look at leaders, again, go back to the leadership thing, and you think about the leaders that you may have played alongside, and you look at this situation today, can you pick? I find it difficult. I look around and think to myself, obviously having owned a football club, and it was in the Premier League for a short period of time, but notwithstanding that, leaders at every level are leaders, right? Whether they're playing in the Championship or playing in the Premier League, you want your guy on the pitch to be something slightly more significant. When you look around, who do you naturally gravitate to and think, well, I'll tell you what, if I was managing now, I'd have him as a leader, I'd have him as my captain, I'd have him in situ. But if you were picking leaders, who would you pick?
You have to search for them.
Well, this is the problem.
I mean, right now, the first name that comes to mind, coming to the end of his career, James Milner. You know, a proper lad. I've worked with him.
Jordan Henderson? We've gone straight for Liverpool player, have you?
Yeah, well, no, trust me, that was the first thing, because as you were asking the question, I was thinking Man United. And then I thought Man City. They obviously have some leaders, Man City. But it's not...
We'd have picked Company, wouldn't we? You'd have picked Company, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Bernardo Silva would be a leader in a very different type of... De Bruyne, possibly, although he said something during the World Cup which he shouldn't have said about his teammates, where felt they were past their best. I mean, City over recent history must have some proper leaders.
I mean, this is a sort of layman-esque expression, Graeme, but I would have thought that you would have alighted upon the sort of bite, bollock and bark merchants.
No.
But in that sentiment...
Well, I wasn't that.
What?
I wasn't that.
What?
If you had any of my contemporaries, any of my teammates in here, I was not that. I didn't growl at them.
Just the opposition?
Yeah, I saw them as enemy, but my own teammates, to a man, they would say no. Didn't shout at them, didn't growl at them.
That's an interesting one, Graeme, because as a manager, I would pick you as having that attribute, as someone that would have very strong words to say to players. And I'll give you an example. Let's say I wrote about him once that I would strangle him with his own tongue, Craig Bellamy. But you had a proper situation with him, didn't you?
I'm manager of Newcastle. We played, we're at Charlton. They're in the Premier League. I think we're winning 2-0. They make it 2-1. Super Sunday game, pouring down with rain. I make a substitution. Round about 80-something minute. And the dressing rooms are down to the left. The dugouts are further up the pitch. So I'm concentrating on the game. Craig Bellamy's coming off. And he said something the cameras got picked up. Very easy to lip read. So we end up getting the result. I think one of my staff had said, by the way, when you took him off, he called you. I said, that's not a problem. We've got the result. Not a problem. So on the Monday, they're off on the Tuesday, they're in. I said, let's have a meeting. Let's talk about, just a quick chat about the weekend. So I'm sitting on a stage in the meeting room at Newcastle United's training ground, and Craig is sitting in front of me. I mean, he's not 3 rows back. He's straight in front of me. And I was talking, and I can see him shaking his head, and I'm trying not to look at him, not look at him. And then in the end, I just had to say, Craig, what is it I'm saying that you're not agreeing with? And before I got a chance to speak, I'd taken a step towards him, and then I told him 3 different things that I wasn't happy with. The last being, and it was, by the way, you told me to do one on Sunday. And by that time, I've got my hands on them. Now, it's not something that I've ever done before. But I think Craig would, if he was sitting here, would admit, and he has admitted, both privately and publicly, he was a difficult boy to deal with. But he was a fabulous little player.
Yeah,
he was a fabulous player, but he was a pain in the ass to deal with.
Yeah, he surprised me once because I was out in London 10 or 15 years ago, and I'd written an article in the Observer, and I think it was about the Newcastle situation and the players, and you can speak to it far more than I can because you were there. And I think Bellamy was causing mayhem, and I'd written an article saying, if this little played for me, I think I'd strangle him with his own tongue, which is the anecdote I just said to you earlier on. And he walked up to me in a hotel bar about 2 or 3 years after I'd written the article, and I thought, this little sod's going to have something to say for himself. And he really surprised me because he turned around and said, I read that article, it made me think, and I'd love to have played for a chairman like you that had the balls to say things that others people wouldn't say. So it surprised me. Do you think perhaps Bellamy has mellowed over the years?
Yeah, 100%. I thought he wrote a book, and I think he was full of apologies.
Yeah.
And he was a talented boy, and I can remember it was the first time anyone ever said it to me. I need you to take me to the next level. And he wanted to improve all the time, and I'm not sure. That has to.
Do you think footballs are worse? I've never had a problem as an owner. Never had a problem. Your mate Trevor didn't deal with a situation once upon a time where he brought a confrontation on in the dressing room with a particular player, Clinton Morrison, called it on and didn't deal with it, and the dressing room was lost from there on in. I've never had a problem with managers. There's a language of football that's slightly different to the rest of the world, and people don't like to accept it, but I think it's still there and it should still be accepted. There's a physical sport, and every now and again things get a little bit emotive. It's a visceral reaction. Do you think sport, or football specifically football, is worse off or better off for the ability to managers to be in a dressing room and every now and again pin a player?
Let me tell you why it's worse. There has to be a leader stroke boss in every business. If you imagine a scenario where you as the manager walk into a dressing room with 20 guys and one of your players is just not at it for whatever reason, and you're digging him out and you're saying harsh things, never mind getting hold of him by the scruff of the neck, but you're digging him out.
Yeah, you're concentrating his mind.
You're falling out with him because he has such an opinion of himself, which is exaggerated today far more than when I played. Players who are average players are on X amount of weight.
Money,
It gives them a great deal of independence and belief. And they generally have an entourage and who are blowing smoke up their backsides all the time, telling them how wonderful they are.
Well, I use an expression.
The media don't get after them either today.
I use an expression, I used it in conjunction with a manager over there. They're getting paid F off money so they can tell everybody to F off.
Yes.
Right? It's that kind of mentality, isn't it?
Exactly. But they're beyond criticism. And maybe touch on that. So you go in, you dig him out, you fall out with him. You haven't just fallen out with him.
He tells his mates.
You've fallen out with 3 or 4 other people in that dress, at least 3 or 4 other people. Collectively, they might be worth 150 million quid. That goes on for a week. One of them will speak to his agent. The agent will leak the story to the friendly press man. He's lost a dressing room. That old chestnut comes out on a regular basis. That's the end. Then the manager is answerable to the chairman. The chairman thinks, wait a minute, that guy's no longer worth 50 million. He's only worth 25 now because he's not in a team because the manager's parked him up. You're vulnerable. If
you were my manager, and I wanted you to be in 2006 when we had a discussion about it, and I'll never forgive you because you didn't take it, and I got fucking Peter Taylor and his Norman and Wisdom impression in the dugout, literally. But I would always back my manager, and it was proven to be the case with Arsenal recently. And I thought that was a great battle that was won there and he must have had the backing to do it. And I would have always gone, well, if it's a regular habit and there's a common denominator and every bloody player's falling out with a manager, then I'll have something to say about it. But if there's a situation where managers are having to do certain things to get people to understand their position in the food chain, because you would always be my champion. Right? My manager's my champion. I wouldn't want to have a dog and bark. I don't want to do your job. I want to pay you a lot of money and get you on and let you to do your job. But you're sort of suggesting that that's done now. The manager will always be the first casualty, irrespective of what the players have done. You're sort of describing a landscape where owners are flaky and not able to back their managers in the bigger picture things. So what's the point of having a football manager if you're not going to back them?
Well, you can go back to Tommy Docherty, who managed in the 60s, maybe the 50s, and that great statement where he said, when the chairman says he's right behind you, I'd rather have him in front of me. Yeah,
we can all deal out those old bullshits. We can listen to Brian Clough turn around, or Len Shackleton say, what do the football club owners know? A blank page. Right, that's all moved on a little bit. I know you might think it hasn't, but it has. It has. Everybody has a space and place.
Has it changed since you were chairman then?
Well, when I walked through the door, apparently the last person you wanted to hear from was a football club owner. All right, that was it. And the media didn't want it. The players, or nobody wanted to hear from them. Now it's changed because if you don't hear from the owner, there's something fundamentally wrong. If you don't know who the owner is, then there's something wrong with that football club. It's not being backed properly. It's not being funded properly. It doesn't have direction. It doesn't have somebody motivated or interested in it. And when I walked through the door, and okay, I was 31 years of age, and I wasn't interested in at acknowledging protocol. And ironically, you were the first guy I met because we played your Blackburn Rovers, and you were tipped to go up that season, and you beat us 2-0 at home in the first game that I owned the team for, and you were the first person to say to me, "Welcome to the madhouse." I remember it. From the point of view of has it changed? Yeah, absolutely it's changed. Because this nonsense and this crap, and I was always a massive admirer of the Brian Cloughs of the world. I think they're one of the most mercurial, inspirational managers of his time. And I think he probably could still manage now. But yeah, I do think that would I want to pick teams? Why? I've got to pay you a lot of money to do a job. Why would I want to do it for you? I'd want you to be accountable for it, and I'd want you to have conversations with me about it, and I'd want to be kept in the loop, because if I own a football team, why wouldn't I be interested in what the bleeding football team's doing? So yeah, it has changed. You don't think so?
My best jobs were where I had a tight relationship with chairman, chief executive.
Where? With John Williams?
Brilliant.
Yeah, well, Blackburn.
He was brilliant.
Yeah.
David Murray, David Holmes, on my first job. And I think when you have that, John Williams and I would fall out twice a week. He'd come down.
It's not about fall out, though. It's about you do what we do afterwards.
But he'd always, be lighting a fire under you, which I didn't mind. I mean, I wouldn't agree with him at the time. And then on the way home from the training ground, going down the M6, I would phone him up, or he would phone me up. And by the end of that conversation on the phone, we're mates again. But that was a really healthy situation as far as I was concerned. We told each other how we felt. We didn't agree at the time. We both go away and think about it and maybe temper our thoughts on the situation.
Could you manage now? Not would you want to?
Sometimes I think I could, and sometimes I think no, couldn't.
Okay, we'll expand upon that.
I had a problem in several jobs where I felt I played football in a certain way. I was committed. I had a great desire to win football matches. Sometimes got me in trouble, and I expected that from my players. This is professional sport. This is the real deal. And I believe, you sometimes, if you want to win football matches, we're talking about football, you have to go right up to the wire in terms of pushing the rules and being maybe slightly more aggressive than most people would enjoy. And that's how I played. That's how I played, and it definitely won. I was part of a team that had great players, but I think I played a small part in that when we were running things, and part of my job was to be up there leading.
But does that mean that you're telling me the dynamics of what would be involved? But does it mean you could manage? Because you mentioned Manchester City as this sort of shiny beacon of wonderful things. Let's imagine in some far-flung universe that someone was foolish enough to give you a Man City job.
I think.
Could you turn that silk purse into a sow's ear, or the other way around?
It's hardly. I mean, Man City right now have the best group of players that I have ever known in my 50-odd years in the English game. They have the best group. You look at
talent-wise,
yeah,
character-wise.
Well,
because we got your mate in there.
I come back to
Jack Grealish.
Yeah, I got to come back to. There's a couple of players that are obviously lead from the front. You only ever need one, and you only need one to lead from the front, and the rest will pile in behind. But I was going to say that this is the strongest group of players I've ever known in my time in the English game. And if you think about, other than the goalkeeper,
by strongest, what do you mean?
Squad,
sheer ability.
Talented.
Yeah, sheer
talented.
ability. Yeah, right.
If you think of, when they make a substitution, other than the goalkeeper, De Bruyne, Silva possibly comes into that, and Haaland this year, when they're making a substitution, it's a like for like in terms of quality. There's only 4 players you would think, well, Haaland goes off, who comes on? That's going to be weaker. De Bruyne goes off, who comes on? That's going to be a bit weaker. They got Gundogan, they got Silva, they got some fabulous midfield players, but I think De Bruyne has just been that. The goalkeeper certainly, I don't think the number 2. He's a great goalkeeper they've got. So I think like for like, when they make a substitution, it's like for like in terms of quality.
So do you think you could manage this side?
Do you
think, given the circumstances, because you've laid out a situation where you think that the tail wags the dog, the players get away with murder, you're on the victim's end of everything that goes wrong, and you can't put them in a position where you can make them really accountable too robustly?
I think it's a slight contradiction. When you've got the best players, they're the ones you don't have to spend time on. You just guide them. You don't have to have any harsh words with them. Very, very rarely. You're guiding them because part of the reason you're a top player is because you realise when you should be training harder, you realise that on a match day I should be doing this and not that. No one needs to tell you that. So in that respect, a manager has an easier ride. And I think I think I've heard Pep say it. I've got the best players, so I should win it.
What do you make of this desire and ideal that footballers must have societal views and lever these views and be used to express their point of view?
The footballers.
I think so, but I'm interested in what you think about it.
It's a minefield for them because at the end of the day, they'll be so concentrated on their own jobs, which is to play football, stay fit, train properly, live the good life. And then I think them to be asked...
What did you make of the England team going to Qatar and all the noise that of all these countries going there protesting against the World Cup and all the human rights issues that we know to be there, and then being told if you want to wear these armbands, you're going to get a yellow card if you do it? I thought to myself, well, if you want to stand up for something, have some skin in the game.
Yellow card, yeah.
Get on with it. Are you totally against the idea? Because I don't think footballers are role models. I don't think they should have societal responsibilities upon them. I get it. I get it. Marcus Rashford's great, and he perhaps helped the government to have a U-turn on some of the thinking that they had around free school meals and stuff like that. But I get a bit tired of the media holding people to standards and judging them by it.
I would have been 22, 20, the World Cup in 78, Argentina.
On the march of Ali's army.
Yeah.
Not for long though, were you?
No. Argentina was ruled by a military junta.
Yeah.
And we were getting letters.
Corrupt World Cup, yeah.
We were getting letters saying, you mustn't go, you mustn't go. Now, for me, knowing what I know now, read a lot more, I like to think more worldly, I wouldn't go to that if it was now and I was a player, knowing what I know now. I mean, you talk about...
So hang on, you just said that you don't think you should stand for anything, and now you're saying that you should stand for something. Your country calls you, you're a proud Scotsman,
I'm talking about a football player at 23, 24, is fully concentrated on his job, which is to play football.
Yeah.
I don't expect them to be worldly and well-read about every situation in the Middle East or South America or wherever else. So I think for them as a football player...
So you're saying if they are well-read and well-rehearsed, that they have the right to have these opinions and use the pitch
that's not an
and the platform and the court as a leverage.
Wearing an armband and refusing to go and play in a World Cup because there is hundreds, if not thousands, of young people disappearing from their homes week, month on month for a number of years. That's a very different story to you staying.
Yeah, I suppose I see your point. What you're saying is actually I'd have the balls to back it up. If I knew what I knew, if I knew then what I knew now, actually I would sacrifice something and not play for my country because I believe in the fact that this was an appalling World Cup to be awarded to an appalling country, and rather than virtue sigma my way into actually doing nothing, I'd have the balls to stand down.
Deal.
Well, leadership, I suppose. Do you think leaders are born, or do you think they're manufactured?
That's a difficult one. I can only speak for myself. I came from, as you've alluded to, I'm an extremely confident person. I was the youngest of three sons, came from a great family, had a great childhood.
You're wonderful, aren't you? In your own eyes,
my opinion,
I know you are, Graeme.
No, but I'm trying to...
I didn't know until you told me, but I do know now.
I'm trying to explain to whoever will listen to this, my confidence came from where? I think it was because of my upbringing, because of the parents I had and because of the brothers I had and the environment I grew up in. And did that make me a leader? It certainly made me confident. And I think if you're confident, there's no leadership.
But it's natural leaders, isn't there?
Yeah, there's no leadership without being confident.
Yeah. I built businesses and I stood out in front and I do the things I do because I know I'm a natural leader. I might not always be right, but I bring people, I think leaders bring them with you. You might an ability to have confrontation, not steer away from it.
Did he just say you're not always right?
Well, no, I'm not always right, but more often than not I am. So I don't think you can manufacture leaders. I think you can make people better. I think you can give people some backbone. I think you can give people a little bit of substance. I think you can give people a little bit of belief. But I think the real natural leaders are just there and they do it and they have a mode of operating. They have alchemy. And that's what I think of you. I remember, again, another example of you. I never forgot it. When I was watching you, you were awfully behaved. You played Palace at Selhurst Park. You beat us 3-2. You were 3-0 at half-time. In the first season, again, I think you got Blackburn promoted that season. And I have never seen a manager before or since abuse the fourth official as much as you did. From every single word in the lexicon of foul language you used.
And the director's box is close there, so you'd have heard most of it.
I did. I heard it. But to me, that was the job that you were doing at the time. That was what was required. I don't like it. I don't think that officials should be put in those sort of positions by managers. And I think if the officials haven't got the balls to sanction you for doing it, that's their gift.
Simon, that still happens today.
Yeah, I
Every
agree.
Saturday, Sunday afternoon, that still happens today. I mean, managers are two people. You know, when you're winning, you're a nice guy, you're an open book. When you're losing, you're a nasty, horrible, non-trusting individual.
What was most difficult for you, moving into your managerial career? What was most difficult to you, managing up or managing down?
I didn't find talking to chairman and chief execs difficult.
What about hands-on owners to absentee owners? Owners that want to be very involved and ones that are slightly removed.
All right, I'm not going to.
How did you find that sort of? Because you must have had them. I mean, you had Freddie Shepherd at Newcastle, John Williams. You liked at Blackburn, but it was not John's money; it was Jack's money. Let's say Freddie, for example, because Newcastle is a unique football club.
That was my most difficult job.
Why?
Partly because of that relationship.
And I know Freddie Shepherd, and I knew Douglas Hall, I knew Sir John Hall, I knew them relatively well, and I know what kind of character Freddie could be at times, and I knew what Kenneth, his son, could be involved in as well. But are we talking about your inabilities to manage up because this guy wants to be involved in certain things? Or are we talking about someone that stepped across the line? So are we saying that you prefer absent owners that leave you to your own devices? Because I think you guys need a lot of support. I think this idea that you managers are all Churchillian characters.
It doesn't have to be black and white. It's not like all or nothing, that relationship. 7 jobs prior to Newcastle, I had no issues managing up. None. Absolutely none. Newcastle, that was an issue.
So, as a matter of course, it's not a binary choice. You're okay. Well, let me rephrase it. What's a good owner look like? Both in your time and now.
Well, I think whether you're talking about football or any other business, a good owner, a good boss is someone that supports you through thick and thin. Your definition of thin might be different to mine.
Does it give you everything you want when you want to?
No, I accept that is not the case. I accept there's no one gets that unless you're managing at Man City or PSG maybe. 2
other topics of interest that I think are engaging, which is the area that you find yourself in now. And I've always said, and I said at the opening outset of this episode, that there are pundits that I can listen to and pundits that I can't. And I've always found you to be a pundit I could listen to because there's resonance in what you're saying, and it doesn't seem to be steeped in mysticism or the current vogue of what's being said. When you look across the punditry landscape, who do you look at and go, I tell you what, I'll listen to him? And of course, when you look across the punditry landscape and you think, I can't be bothered to listen to him.
I'd first have to say, I think the world of television has changed greatly in my time.
Yeah. It's changed everything. It's made managers' job more difficult.
Yeah, I think punditry is like every other thing on television. Sometimes you want to watch it. Sometimes...
Yeah, that's great. Who do you like and who do you not like?
I think football's like every other business where sometimes you want to watch. Who do I like?
Don't be a fanny. Answer the question.
Who do I like? That's a good question. I like Roy. I like listening to Roy.
2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. I told you that.
I like...
if you listen a bit more, you'll learn something.
Yeah.
That was good.
Your turn will come. Have I said that to you yet?
I said it to you.
Oh, did I nick it from you?
You nicked it from me and said it to Keane and blamed it on me. And by the way, you were right to say it as well. So you like Keane?
Yeah, I like Roy.
Who else?
I think, the Chuckle Brothers can be entertaining.
Really?
No, I think Gary Neville and Cara can be entertaining.
Do you?
Yeah. It makes me chuckle anyway.
I spend a lot of time calling out Neville or calling the Mayor of Manchester, the de facto Mayor of Manchester, and a barrack room lawyer. Do you think I'm wrong for doing that?
I think he fights every cause going. I've got to choose my word. When is this going out?
Don't be so cowardly. No, it's called Up Front. Get on with it.
I think he
come to the dark side, Graeme, where we don't care.
Yeah, I think he does overstep the mark with some of these crusades that he goes on.
Yeah.
Because no one's really interested in listening to him with in certain subjects.
Do you think Keane disappears into a pantomime villain sometimes? Do you think he plays a role? I saw you with him in Qatar, and I know that you guys get on pretty well. And you had a little set to, didn't you, where you go out arguing about a particular decision and a penalty.
It was a direction that the referees had given prior to the World Cup, and it was the Saudi Arabia Argentina game. I think it was a penalty given for Argentina, where the guy clearly pulled the shirt, and under the new directive, that was going to be a penalty. Roy didn't think it was a penalty, but I made the point that this is the new directive the referees have issued for this World Cup. So I think in that one I was right.
What do you make of those guys walking out on Match of the Day, by the way?
Nah, if it had been me, I wouldn't have walked out. Well, I think
they should get fired personally, but
I think we, without going into any great detail, it wasn't Gary's first time upsetting people. Are
you in the camp he shouldn't have said it?
Yeah, because I think when you take the BBC shilling, you've got to be very careful what you say politically.
Yeah. Also, freedom of speech doesn't come with freedom of consequence, is it?
No, freedom of speech is something that doesn't apply if you're an employee of the BBC. I think you have to be very careful.
Do you think commentary, because a lot of allegations get made, and I've heard you be less than this, do you think all commentary and punditry should be impartial?
In my opinion, and you're asking questions, and it's me, as I understand it, I give the opinion. In my humble opinion.
And I scrutinise it.
In my humble opinion, I think there's a handful of clubs that you can compare with Liverpool. So in respect to me...
So do you think punditry should be impartial? Because people get very aerated when they see Jamie Carragher or Gary Neville clearly doubling down. Because I remember listening to Harry Carpenter when Frank Bruno was fighting Mike Tyson, and nobody thought that there was need to be impartial when when Harry Carpenter's going, go on, Frank. But it seems to be this expectation now that pundits have got to be absolutely impartial and show no bias. And
I think I've tried to be. I think when Liverpool are going, I've been doing this for 20 years. I think when Liverpool are having sort of some
listening to yourself,
have barren years, I've been critical of them. And when Man United were having a great time, I was complimentary about them. And I'll say it, not Man United. No, not in the slightest. Man United are one of the great football teams in the world. They're one of that handful that you can hold up with Liverpool, with Real Madrid, with Bayern Munich, with Barcelona. That's the level Man United and Liverpool are at. And it's hard to make that comparison. That
leads me into a producer-inserted question, because
it's got to be about Arsenal, is it?
No, it's not actually. It's going to take us behind the scenes of off-air at Anfield for Liverpool versus United and what Roy Keane was like watching his team get beat 7. Because I know you had a spat with Neville, didn't you?
Yeah, I think Roy was boiling inside, but took it gracefully. He knew his team hadn't turned up; they'd been miserable. And Gary chose to see it that Man United weren't that bad and Liverpool weren't that good.
That's not very illuminating. I'm sure there was more than that.
All right, John, full story. We turn up before the game. Before we go in there, there's a bit of banter amongst us.
Because you said they were going to win, didn't you? You said
I was asked the question off air.
Yeah.
What do you think the result will be? And I said, I think Liverpool. I don't know. I think why I think this, but Liverpool will have a really good day today. I think they'll win and they'll win well. So half an hour later, we're on there, and then Alexa said to me, "Well, are you going to repeat what you said on air?" Sorry, Alexa, Gary. Gary said to me, "Are you going to repeat what you said on air, off air?" I said, "Yeah, of course." I said, "I think Liverpool will win and they'll win well today." So then Liverpool do exactly that, and then after the game. We're up in the studio and there's the 4 of us, Cara, Gary and Roy. And in one of the breaks, Gary said, "Well, Liverpool weren't very good today." I said, "You called me out before the game." And I repeated on there what I was willing to say off air. Are you willing to do the same? And he was reluctant to do it. And I have to say I enjoyed that bit of television as much as any television I've watched in the last 20 years. My team beats
what goes around comes
my
around.
Team beats their biggest rival 7-0.
Yeah.
So it was a great day for me all around.
You got any fears about being?
I'll stop you. No.
No, you have. Everyone's got fears
No.
Your fear is actually paying for a dinner or buying a round or something of that nature. Do you fear being cancelled? Because I tell you why. I tell you why I asked that, right? Because
do you?
No, I don't. I couldn't care less because I don't define my career by other people's points of views, and media isn't my career. And I think if you're going to go hard, go hard or go home, right? But I was very surprised with you. I tell you why I asked the question. It's twofold. Right? The first part is when you made those observations and you talked about it being a man's game. When you had Karen Carney sat next to you and there was a furore about you saying, we've got our game back. It's a man's game being played by men, right? And I went on, and there was an uproar about it. And there was this big load of old pylons that came on about what you were and what you weren't and how you should be this and how you should be that. And I went after it straight away on radio because we were on a Monday and I was outraged by it because I wasn't prepared it to be leveraged into something that it wasn't. Yet you gave a snivelling explanation justifying your comments for something that was clearly evident to be not said from a position of disadvantaging anybody. 104 years of age, why are you worried about being cancelled?
I'm not worried in the slightest. First of all, I was referring to because both games have been really good. And the referee...
I know what you were doing.
The referees have changed somewhat since then in terms of letting the game flow.
And the physicality of the game was flowing.
And those 2 games, the 2 games, the referee let some challenges go on. And it was men challenging men.
Yeah.
And I was talking about the 2 games of football.
I know what you're doing.
Of course,
that's not the question I'm asking you. But you of all people that thinks everybody else is a pudding and has very strong views and has very definite outlooks and will live and die by his own opinions and has had a career where he didn't pull off or necessarily pull back from anything, right? Why would you feel the necessity at this stage in your life, because I bloody well wouldn't, to turn around and say, well, I didn't mean what I said. You've taken it the wrong way. I don't understand that. Why would you do that? Why would you feel the need to do it?
See, but you're again suggesting that I've apologised. I was pointing out.
It's an explanation.
I was talking about those 2 games, and I thought that is something
isn't it? You, Graeme,
I don't see that as an apology. I had nothing to apologise for.
Graeme, we both know that I went out on the front foot for you. A lot of people don't do those sort of things. Not you asked me to, by the way, and said, "Oh, this is absolutely preposterous. Who do these people think they are?" Trying to categorise it and recharacterise it in a certain way, and you were told by Sky to put something out. And I don't understand why you'd have done it, because it tells me that you're worried about being cancelled. So that tells me...
No, I'm not worried about being cancelled. Let me tell you where I am. I am privileged. Been so privileged. I started at 15 and I finished my career at 30, let's say 33, 34. I played my last game at 35. I played with great players at Liverpool at 32, 33. When they finished, that was it for them. So I rolled into management, and then I rolled into the football work. Yep. So it means from the age of 15 to 70, I've been employed by football.
Variety of people. Yeah.
How blessed am I? And I'm not going to change now, am I? I'm not going to.
No, I don't think so. That's why I'm making the point, because I was surprised.
I'm not going to be too concerned if someone takes exception and cancels me because I've used a term that for the last 50 odd years in my adult life I've been using about. I've used in the football sense. Does
it annoy you when people refer to you as a dinosaur? Do you go, hang on a second, I've forgotten more than you'll ever know?
I tell you what makes me happy more than anything. When in punditry, I speak to few people. I basically don't like too many people. But I get messages passed on to me by serious football people saying how much they enjoy my work. And I still get it today. So that's what matters to me. It's not about what, I don't know. It's like when you're a player, you're only interested in what your manager and coaches think of you, not listening to anyone else.
But do you find it difficult to manoeuvre yourself through the current regime of what terminology is acceptable, which is outdated and which is offensive? Do you find yourself having to check and think and pause for thought?
It's not difficult.
Or do you not even think about it?
No, it's not difficult. It's not difficult because I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm prepared to take the consequences. I know I'm not going to say anything outrageous. I might use a word in the wrong place, and if that happens, that happens, and I'll take it.
Because I'm like that when I'm doing the radio show. I'm well aware that I'm walking a tightrope because I want
That's live.
It's like I think so. If you're going to go hard, if you're going to go do something, I think you go hard or you go home, as I've said earlier. And I'm well aware that I'm walking a tightrope. One day I may fall off that tightrope and strangle myself with it. But I think if you're going to do the media, if you're going to do something and you've got something to say, you've got some substance, and you can stand it up. And my attitude towards life, and even with debates with you, is stand it up, Souness. Stand up your point of view. Let's debate it.
I'm not blowing smoke up your, but the world of football listens to you. on your shows.
Every now and again,
You should take great credit for that. Not that I'm giving you any.
Would you say, I don't know if it's right, but that you were a genius of a player in your position?
A genius?
In the position that you occupied, which was a certain role, you were, the midfield player that you were.
Well, I'd never use that.
All right, we'll just say
to describe myself.
Right. Were you at the top of your game?
I am, yeah.
In your field?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think
I think the stats
that you took that top of your game from a player to being a manager?
I don't think...
Because argument would say, I don't
think one goes hand in hand, by the way.
Well, I categorically don't think they do.
No. Well, you look at Wenger, you look at Fergie.
Yeah, categorically it's not.
Mourinho.
And you look at the generation of young players that are coming through now, young managers that are supposed top players like Lampard and Gerrard that aren't capable or as capable as one would have assumed they would be, because once upon a time they're stellar playing careers. But you came from being this very strong leader, cut from a very different cloth of what I think the modern day football looks like. Even the Gerrards and the Lampards of the world, I think, would find themselves a shrinking violets in comparison to you. And you came from this stellar career that a lot of these guys have had whiffs of, but yours was stellar in terms of what you achieved at Liverpool and where your career went. But then you land as a player manager at Rangers and you go into Liverpool and you produce the second worst record of a Liverpool manager in 30 years.
Yeah. And if you go through the managers over 30 years. Well, can I first start off by saying when I went to Rangers, I got stroke of luck. I managed to land Terry Butcher. And then I had Richard Gough and I had Ray Wilkins. And that's why I always talk about having good senior pros. I had the best. So I think that was my stroke of luck. Now we get to Liverpool. Now we come to Liverpool. Yeah. I took on a job at Liverpool a couple of years after Hillsborough. It was a disaster, which the world knew about. But unless you're actually in the city, you didn't get the feeling of how desperate it was and the injustice that the supporters, correctly so, felt. So when me taking that job a couple of years afterwards, I was walking into, it wasn't something I'd prepared for. And I think that stayed with the club long after I left the football club. I think it was because the way justice treated them.
If you'd have read the room, you wouldn't have done the same.
Yeah. They didn't. There was a feeling that, we've been treated so badly here by the authorities. And that lasted for I would suggest a couple of decades, and even still going on. I think in some people's eyes, some relatives still feel they haven't.
Well, of course, and then if you exacerbate it with current circumstances, when you've got European Champions League finals and Liverpool fans being treated in a certain way, it's always going to be that situation.
How could it happen to them of all
absolutely.
The clubs? But my thinking, 99% of my thinking about football management and how you deal with players would have come from my time as a player at Liverpool, which was the Mecca. It was the Cambridge, Oxford University. If you could access the training ground, that is where every disciple of football wanted to go and worship at the feet of Paisley. Prior to that, Shankly. So you say this is the worst record in 30 years. If you go back to Shankly took over the club, then Paisley took over the club, then Joe Fagan took over the club, then Kenny took over the club. And I walk into a football club that was on its feet. I hadn't had success for a couple of years.
Out on its feet, yeah.
Hadn't had success for a couple of years. I'd had a group of players that were getting older together, and under normal circumstances at Liverpool would have been moved on long before they got to the ages that they got to. And does
it irritate you that I've asked you this question? Because you're spending a lot of time explaining what other people have done rather than telling me about what you've done.
I'm painting the picture. I walked into the dressing room. I was the first one since Paisley walked through the door where all of a sudden I'm buying players under pressure. The great teams of Liverpool were always bought on them being top at the time or near enough top, and they were buying players like Ray Kennedy, double winner at Arsenal, Terry McDermott, bought him from Newcastle, I think it was 180 grand. They didn't go in the team straight away. Kenny and I were the first ones to come into the club and go straight into the team at that period. So they were buying players, they were having a look, they were being taught to play the Liverpool way and slowly but surely introduced. For me, that is a luxury I didn't have. I was buying players under pressure, so I had to go straight in. I had 3 players come to me, big players come to me and say, I'll got a chance to go so-and-so, I'd like to go. At that moment, I made a major mistake. But I had the hump with them at that time because I'm thinking, Liverpool, why would you want to be anywhere else other than Liverpool? And I fell out with them. Rather than me say, what I should have said was, I hear you, when I got time for a replacement, when I can find one, I'll allow you to go. But my attitude, because this is Liverpool, you can go tomorrow, son. Three players.
I can relate to that. Do you look back on it with regret? Do you look back on the time at Liverpool? Because smart ass like me can pull that stat out.
No. Listen, I was privileged to have that job. I shouldn't have taken it at that time. I was always destined for that job, I felt, but I shouldn't have taken it at that time, at a time when the club were having the most difficult period, the most difficult period in the club's history.
Again, I suppose I don't like to focus on the negative, but it's got some intrigue in it. When you look back over your management career, besides obviously not coming to work for me, what's your biggest regret?
No, the biggest regret is my time at Liverpool.
That is it.
Doing an article in the Sun newspaper when we got to the final of the FA Cup. Went to extra time penalties. They took a picture of me and my girlfriend at the time, who's now been my wife for the best part of 30 years. Missed the deadline on a Monday night because of the extra time and penalties. Didn't go in on a Tuesday, and on a Wednesday it went, and that was the anniversary of Hillsborough. That killed me in the eyes. And it still has. Yeah. And I have to accept that with a lot of the support at Liverpool, because I was quite a popular player there.
Anyway, Graeme, I've really enjoyed today seeing you and speaking to you. And the last question I've got for you, away from football, what are you most passionate about? What drives you the most? I mean, you can say family, but obviously that's a stock answer.
Family.
I was at something with you very recently, so I don't know whether that's part of the equation or you want to talk about that.
I'm heavily involved in a charity now.
I mean, I was up there with you on a weekend, and I didn't particularly, as I said to you, I said it on a stage, I'm surrounded by jocks all week. I really don't want to spend my Sunday afternoon, evening with a bunch of 300 jocks. But when you sent me the details of this Deborah charity, it, as I said to you and I said to the audience, it took my breath away because it is one of those, and it's a disease that not many. I wasn't aware of it until 5 years ago, and it's the most evil and cruelest of all diseases, and it just robs these young people of any quality of life. And like you said, if you've become an atheist as a result of it, because if there's a God up there, you can't quite imagine what he's doing.
It's life limiting, these poor children. And it's not just the sufferers, but also the families have to deal with it. And that's traumatic, to say the least. And it's changed me as a human being. I am now an atheist because I cannot believe there's an almighty that would allow this to happen to one person.
Graeme, give us a little bit more on the charity Deborah.
Well, Deborah, it's to help children. You're born with this disease. It's epidermolysis bullosa, and basically you in the worst cases,
butterfly skin. Yes.
Yeah, in the worst cases, and I've shown you some pictures on my phone. Well, one little, my little girl. She's not my little girl, but I've become very close to her, Isla. And it's like someone's taken a blowtorch to their skin. It's continually raw.
And it's in their mouth as well, isn't it?
And it involves inside tracts as well. So, there's not a moment of the day that she's not in pain. Do you remember when you maybe burnt your finger with the end of your finger with a little bit of hot water and you
magnify it 1,000 times?
You think it's the sorest thing that could possibly happen. Imagine your whole body being covered in that. And it's red raw. Yeah. They lose their skin. If Isla was standing here, she's going to fall over, I'd let her fall. Because if I was to grab her, it's
the lesser two evils.
All her skin would come off. And these kids have to take the strongest of drugs to get through their lives, like ketamine, diamorphine. And it's just the most painful, cruelest, worst thing I think you could experience as a human being.
You sent me the pictures, and obviously I said to you, and I said it again earlier on in this, it took my breath away, but I showed it to Rod Stewart, terrible name drop. I showed it to Rod Stewart, and he was, I said, look, I'm going to show you this because I'm going up to a charity with Souness, and he said, show it to me. And I said, I don't know, Rod, you're just about to have some dinner at this charity function with you now. He said, show it to me. And so I said, okay, here you go. And he went, okay, whatever you need. And that Rod gave some tickets and donated
fair play to Rod for doing that.
Tickets for the event.
But, and fair play to you, because without the other night up in Glasgow, we wouldn't have raised the kind of money we did. So thank you.
And I want to be involved going forward. So well done. It's been a pleasure.
No, I've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed this episode.
No, it's been good.
Thanks for coming on the pod and being so upfront with me.
I have to say that you do hide the compassionate side very well.
Do I?
Deep down, I think you might be an all right guy.
I think you know I am.
No, it's been great. It's been great. Cheers, pal. Cheers.
Up Front with me, Simon Jordan, is brought to you by William Hill. Future episodes can be found on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. 18 plus, please gamble responsibly.